कृष्ण कृष्णाय भूतले श्रीमते भाति वेदांता स्वामी नित्यानंद कृष्ण पदाय कृष्ण प्रसाय भूतले श्रीमते भाति वेदांता स्वामी नित्यानंद नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी चारिणे निर्विशेषाशून्यवादी सत्यादृश चारिणे नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी चारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी सत्यादृश चारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरभक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरभक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Gaura, Hari Bol, Jai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Jai Gaura, Hari Bol, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Shishnitai Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shishnitai Gaura. Again, Hare Krishna, everyone. Sorry about that. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and we're going to continue our discussions on chapter 25. So we'll start the praise to our spiritual masters so we can get their blessings and mercy to have the right understanding of these pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all his instructions as well, so that we can serve him better. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanvinashalakaya Chakshurunmitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarini. So I'd like to thank you all again for joining us and for giving me the opportunity to present these discussions on Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings from the book Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is written by Srila Prabhupada and which is based on the authorized biography of Lord Chaitanya called Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. This 25th chapter is called Personal and Impersonal Realization. It's a continuation of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions to the great follower of the impersonalist tradition, and his name was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was living in the area called Jagannath Puri 500 years ago. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met him there after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas when he entered the renounced order of life. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, being a great scholar, wanted to instruct Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, thinking the Lord to be a young sannyasi. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was 24 years old when he took sannyas. But the Lord ended up teaching him about what the absolute truth is in his most superior aspect, his supreme aspect as a person, right, rather than his aspect of light, which is formless. So we'll chant the invocation prayer before we proceed into our discussion today, our discussion proper today. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Devi Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Devi Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Devi Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda. And the translation is: Glory to Shri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, glory to all the devotees of Shri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. This verse 18 of the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So last week we had said that integral to our progress in spiritual life is actually getting to know the personality of Godhead, because he is a person in his ultimate aspect. He does indeed have an aspect of light, right? That which is called the impersonal Brahman. So we do not deny the philosophy of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to a degree, that that God does indeed have a form of light, but this form is not supreme, right? Because light can only express some of God's abilities and attributes, and particularly his attribute of eternality, but not of knowledge and not of bliss, right? And this is, of course, because light can't express much more than eternality, right? Being without form. So in order for us to know God more, we have to get to know his form, and we have to get to know his personality. And this is when we realize what it really means to have full and complete spiritual knowledge, right? Full and complete spiritual knowledge of God. And then we experience the bliss that goes along with that, right? And that bliss is complete, again, when we know God as a person. And all of this is integral to us developing our relationship with him. Because in order to attain him, we have to have that relationship. The relationship with him puts us into that consciousness that we need to be in order to exist in the spiritual world after we leave this world. But also we can express that consciousness in this life as well. That will lead us to, as we'll find a little later on in our discussions, the ability to overcome the miseries of this world, because we will be situated in a completely spiritual consciousness. Right? Being situated in the spiritual consciousness means that nothing of this world, no troubles or miseries of this world actually affects us at all. So we had gotten to know Krishna last week in the full, trying to understand, of course, in his aspects of eternity, knowledge, and this, right, in particular. We said that Lord Krishna's his himself, basically, his internal energy, which is non-different from himself, but for the purpose of our discussions, we wanted to understand what it actually means that Krishna is full of energies, spiritual energies, and that these energies are responsible for everything that exists. So we said that his internal energy is called Chit Shakti, right? It's as if I could take the essence of all my energy and everything that my energy can do, how it can cause me to create or bring something into existence, right? Like a garden, how my internal energy or my essence can cause me to digest food, to study at university, or to be happy and enjoy a good time. Right? We all have that essence within us. God's essence, his essence is called Chit Shakti. And this Chit Shakti has other names, Swarup Shakti, because it means the essence of his form. Because Krishna's form and his energy is non-different. Right? It's actually the same. Again, we're describing the energy as if it's different, but it's the same as his form. So it's also called Swarup Shakti, because that whole form is made up of energy. That spiritual energy. Right now, my form is not made up of my spiritual energy, my soul. I have a material body and I have a spiritual soul within. Krishna's form, his essence, himself, right? His spiritual self, it's all the same. Okay. Then it's also called Antaranga Shakti, right? Being internal to Krishna. But he also has an external energy. It's also very interesting because Krishna's energies can be externalized, right? Outside of him, and can exist outside of him while being fully dependent on him. And that external energy is called Bahiranga Shakti, and that's the energy that the influence that we come under when we're in this material world. It's the energy that we choose to exist in because we don't want to have Krishna's control over us anymore. And then, of course, Krishna is also known as Parashakti because he's a supreme energy. He's supreme over his Bahiranga Shakti, that is the external energy, and he's also supreme over us. But also a type of energy of Krishna called the external energy. Sorry, the marginal energy. So Krishna's potency or his energy is expressed in three ways in particular. We said eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So if we had to describe what these three components actually do, then we would do so under their individual names, right? So in Krishna's Chit Shakti, right, the Chit Shakti, Swarup Shakti, when that Shakti expresses as eternality, the ability to bring other things into existence, right? This is called Sandhini Shakti, and that's where Krishna's creating power is dominant. So I also have the ability to create things. So if I choose to create something right now over my ability to eat something, right, then I'll say my creating power is dominant. Okay. So when Krishna's creating power is dominant, that's Sandhini. Right? That's his Chit Shakti is now acting as Sandhini Shakti. And when Krishna's Chit Shakti is expressing knowledge, when it's primarily about conveying knowledge and the consciousness of himself actually to others, then that is called Samvit Shakti. Right? Chit Shakti is becoming Samvit when Krishna is imparting knowledge. And then when Krishna is expressing primarily his pleasure potency, that is called Hladini, right? H-L-A-D-I-N-I. Okay. So then we read a little bit more. Although Sri Bhagavan is Sat personified, he exists and makes others existent through the Sandhini Shakti. So this actually means that Krishna is, of course, always existing. It's not that his power is something separate from him that makes him come into existence, right? But through Krishna's existence, everything else comes into existence. That is actually what Sandhini Shakti does. Sri Bhagavan is the embodiment of knowledge. Right? Krishna is actually knowledge, right, in himself. But he uses the Samved Shakti to know himself, right? Because even he desires to know more about himself. Right? This is the wonder of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he makes others know about him as well. Right? He gives us knowledge of him in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam. Sri Bhagavan is bliss. If he relishes joy using Hladini Shakti, it makes others relish too. So we remember that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's confidential reason for appearing was that he wanted to experience the bliss of himself. He wanted to know that, to have that experience about like what it's like for his devotee to serve him, that extraordinary happiness, in particular of his foremost devotee, Srimati Radharani. This is why he actually appeared in her mood. So Krishna basically has all these aspects. He doesn't need to experience it from anyone because Srimati Radharani is a personification of his Hladini Shakti. So it's not exactly like the happiness that she is experiencing outside of him, right? But through his powers, he is expressing these or experiencing and causing others to as well. So in a way, Srila Prabhupada explains that it's like a boy playing with his shadow. So the shadow is actually him as well, but he's playing with it as if it's something else. So all these energies are actually Krishna, but then he's experiencing it as if it's outside of him. And so that he can also understand himself or enjoy himself, we could say, anyway. Just as we cannot separate Sri Bhagavan's Sat, Chit, and Ananda, Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini too are intermingled with each other. So it means that Krishna is made up of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Not just like I'm made up of so many different abilities, right? We said that those abilities are material, fair enough, and they're not going to exist forever. But Krishna's abilities are eternal. They're always there with him. And it's not that they are exactly separate from him, because in the same way my abilities make up who I am, Krishna's abilities make up who he is. So they're always there. It's just that there may be one that's expressed more than the other for that pastime or that activity that Krishna is engaging in. Now we'll continue reading teachings of Lord Chaitanya. In his blissful identity can be found his pleasure potency. In his eternal identity, he is the cause of everything. And in his cognizant identity, he is the supreme knowledge. Indeed, the word Krishna indicates that supreme knowledge. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is a reservoir of all knowledge, all pleasure, and all eternity. So let's unpack this statement. The first says, in his blissful identity can be found his pleasure potency. So who is that pleasure potency? We said it's Srimati Radharani, right? She's responsible for bringing Krishna bliss and pleasure. So Krishna, he can make his Hladini potency a person. This is his ability. So Krishna doesn't look for pleasure outside of himself. We have to do that. We have to look for pleasure in so many different activities, in so many different relationships and stuff like that. But Krishna doesn't have to do that, right? He puts his whole Hladini potency into a personality, or it becomes, this power becomes a personality, and this is Srimati Radharani. So this is his blissful identity. And then his eternal identity, right? His ability to make other things that are eternal. This is Lord Balaram. Lord Balaram personifies Krishna's his causative self, right? And we understand this because when Krishna expands as Lord Balaram actually starts expanding as everything that Krishna needs. Right? That means everything in Vaikuntha, everything in the spiritual world, like Krishna's bed, his shoes, his residence, all the planets in the Vaikuntha realm, as well as all the Vaikuntha expansions of Krishna, and all expand from Lord Balaram. So although these are ever existing, they're said to be caused by Lord Balaram. But in the material world, which has a clear beginning and a clear ending, right? This is also attributed to Lord Balaram, because Lord Balaram expands through Sri Ram Govinda Maharaj explaining a few weeks ago. He expands as well from Narayan. There's the fourfold expansion, and then from the second fourfold expansion, it's a little complex, but basically we understand that the three Vishnu forms who are responsible for the ultimate creation, maintenance, and destruction of this material world, they all expand from Lord Balaram as well. So he is basically Krishna's, the personification of Krishna's power that causes everything to exist, material and spiritual creation. And then Prabhupada, and in his cognizant identity, he is the supreme knowledge. So Krishna's cognizance of himself, right, is his Sambit potency, right? And through that knowledge of himself, he makes everyone else understand him as well. So Prabhupada says, indeed, the word Krishna indicates that supreme knowledge. Okay, so it's very interesting, because we know that Krishna means the all-attractive one, but that knowledge of the all-attractive one, that actually is Krishna. And Krishna himself is a personification of himself, of course, the knowledge of himself, and of everything else which actually comes from him. It's very interesting. And so we actually see that these three personalities are in the Maha Mantra, Srimati Radharani, Krishna, Balaram. So we actually experience Krishna right through his holy names when we chant his holy names purely. And this is what we are that we're aiming for. So we were reading as well from ISKCON Desire that was helping us get these concepts correct. And from ISKCON Desire, it says that Chit Shakti, Krishna's internal power, itself manifested. It doesn't come from any other source. And Krishna is the source of his own power. Okay, and so Krishna is his own source of happiness, eternality, and knowledge. When the sun rises, it shows itself and illuminates other substances. Similarly, Chit Shakti manifests itself as well as other objects. So Chit Shakti, Krishna's own power, manifests himself right, in this world whenever he needs to appear here. And of course, always in the spiritual world. And then this Chit Shakti, right, being the source of Krishna's creative power, right, in particular through Lord Balaram, actually creates everything else. So actually brings everything else into existence. And then also grants the knowledge, right, by which everything else can understand its existence, everything and everyone else, and also will bring the bliss of that knowledge. Chit Shakti is a conglomeration of Sandhini, Samvit, and Hadini. So we understand now. Bring everything into existence, brings knowledge of everything, which leads to bliss. Chit Shakti has a property called Vishuddha Sattva, right? And Vishuddha Sattva means especially pure goodness. In this material world, we have goodness. Right? This much we know. This is called Sattva Gun. Right? Sattva Gun is the nature when someone is situated in material goodness. And Krishna describes the qualities of material goodness quite a bit in Bhagavad Gita. But as long as one is in the material world, even goodness will be contaminated by qualities of the material world, which means it will still be short-lived. There'll still be some degree of ignorance. There'll still be unhappiness. Right? And there's always the competition between the modes where passion and ignorance are trying to overpower goodness. But when goodness is especially pure, it overcomes those two other modes. It overcomes itself, even the fact that it's material, and becomes situated on a purely, on an absolute plane that's free of any material contamination. We call it especially pure goodness, right? Vishuddha Sattva. And it said here that Sri Bhagavan uses this property of his Swarup Shakti while appearing. All three, Dadini, Sandini, and Sambit, are present in the Vishuddha Sattva. So let's try and explain it in another way. So we are situated in different modes. We said that there's three: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So my mode will color my experiences. So it's like if I put over my vision a red filter, right? So that means that everything that I see through this filter is going to be colored red. Okay? And you have your own filter. And whatever, say you have a green filter, whatever you see is green. And someone else has another filter, and whatever they see is blue. Of course, it's not so straightforward that we only see through one mode. Like you said, the modes are always competing. And the Lord describes this as well. But one will be situated in a dominant mode. So if you're in a dominant passion mode, say you're in the color red, but you have like some green, some goodness, you have some blue, you have some ignorance. But more or less, you have your dominant passion. So your dominant traits are passionate. You're rushed, you're chaotic, you're temperamental, you're always trying to get things done yesterday, competitive, fiery. So how you see the world is through all of these qualities, and how you express yourself is through all these qualities. How you understand things are through those qualities. And whatever foods, whatever people, whatever situations appeal to this mode, all appeal to you. This is what you think everything is like and everything is about. And so if somebody is situated in the mode of goodness, then all the qualities of goodness are going to appeal to them. And they're going to be more calm and more patient. And they're going to try and do things intelligently. And they're going to have knowledge. Right? And they're going to obviously be attracted to situations that are like that, and people that are like that, and foods that augment that, and so on. Right? And so it goes for somebody who is in ignorance. But now, if we would remove all colors from our vision, right? If we would all be situated without any of these modes, right? This is what Vishuddha Sattva is, right? Where there is absolutely no material qualities at all. There's just pure vision, clear vision, no color, right? The consciousness is completely clear. So this is what Krishna's nature is like. And when he comes into the material world, let's imagine every one of us is running around with all our colored filters on, seeing everything like that. And so this whole world appears like that. But Krishna comes in his own clear bubble. So Krishna and everything that surrounds him and everything that is like him is all clear, and all of us are in shades of red, blue, and green. And this is a little bit like what it is to be in Vishuddha Sattva. This is how Krishna can be in this world, but not of this world. He is not affected at all by the red, blue, and green around him, right? He's in his bubble, Vishuddha Sattva, and nothing else is affecting him. Okay. So, wherever Krishna goes in this material world, his Vishuddha Sattva is with him, and therefore he's not affected by anything of this world. Because our actions in these colors, our actions in these modes is what brings us reactions. Okay? We get reactions based on what we do. Since Krishna's without any effect of the modes, he doesn't get any reactions. Everything is absolutely and completely pure. Okay? So inside Krishna's bubble of Vishuddha Sattva, there is eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Right? Sandini, Sadini, and Samvit at the same time. And we could say that how if Krishna's bubble is focused on creation, right? Then his Vishuddha Sattva, his bubble, gets I don't say colored because now I think it's the same as the mode. But if Krishna's because let's put it this way. We already spoke about how when Krishna is primarily focused on creation, then his internal energy, his Chit Shakti becomes more situated in, because of that act of creation, it becomes, well, it gets called Sandini Shakti, even though it's the same Chit Shakti. So now if Krishna's bubble is more focused on creation, then there's a special name to that bubble now, called Adar Shakti, and it's focused. Krishna's environment, right, his pure environment is now focused on creation. So now there's a name for Krishna's environment, right, the power of his environment that's focused on creation, just like there's a name to Krishna's internal power when Krishna is focused on creation. So Sandini Shakti, right, is the name of Krishna's Chit Shakti that creates, and Adar Shakti is the name of Krishna's environment, Vishuddha Sattva, when he creates. Okay, so in the same way, Krishna's environment, his Vishuddha Sattva, gets a name when we're talking about Krishna bringing about knowledge, right? Then it's called Atma Vidya, right? Vidya is knowledge, Atma of self, right? Ourselves as well as Krishna, because the knowledge of ourselves is actually dependent on Krishna. The real knowledge of ourselves is as servants of Krishna. So when we're understanding that, we understand Krishna as well. So in some way, we could say that Atma Vidya is knowledge of self, but it's also knowledge of Krishna and his divinity. So it's Krishna's self as well. And then when Krishna's environment, his bubble, his Vishuddha Sattva is focused on pleasure, right? Then it's called Guhya Vidya. Guhya Vidya. It's Vidya again, knowledge, but knowledge of that which is most confidential, Guhya. And it's only in that phase where we can actually get devotion for Krishna. That's the most confidential thing. So let's read a little more about it. Vishuddha Sattva gets special names depending on the extent of Hladini, Samvit, and Sandini expressed in it. Right? So Krishna's environment, his bubble, if it's focused or it's being expressed in these different ways, it gets a different name. Adar Shakti, when Sandini Shakti expresses itself to a large degree, right? Krishna's creative power expresses itself in his environment, then Vishuddha Sattva is called Adar Shakti. Sri Bhagavan manifests his abode using this power. Right? When Sandini Shakti is dominant, we call it as Shuddha Sattva, not to be confused with Vishuddha Sattva. Sri Bhagavan's power rests on this. His parents' abode, home, bed, etc. are made up of Shuddha Sattva. So this Adar Shakti allows in Krishna's bubble everything that he needs to be manifested. Like his bed, his abode, his shoes, his parents, whatever creative ability needs to be expressed in Vishuddha Sattva is done by Sandini Shakti. Okay. Atma Vidya, when Samvit Shakti, now it's Krishna's knowledge power, makes up the major portion of Vishuddha Sattva. Then we call it Atma Vidya. It has two forms. It brings knowledge and also the preliminary knowledge, the harbinger of knowledge, when knowledge is about to manifest. It gives knowledge to the worshipper. The function of Samvit is to give knowledge about Sri Krishna's divinity and all sorts of spiritual awareness, right? So say Krishna's bubble is focused on that knowledge. Like we could say on the battle of Kurukshetra, then Atma Vidya is being expressed. Okay. Guhya Vidya, when Hladini is dominant in Vishuddha Sattva, it is called Guhya Vidya, or secret knowledge. It has two forms, devotion and the harbinger of devotion. It means devotion, and when devotion is about to set in, like the preliminary activities for devotion. For example, when someone is taking to devotional service but not yet purified in it. It gives loving devotion or prem bhakti to a devotee. When we condense Hladini, we get prem. It is made up of blissful and conscious or divine rasa. So it means that the pleasure that Krishna gets can only exist within that environment of purity. Right? So Krishna, in his Vishuddha Sattva, in his bubble of purity, when his internal power, Shakti, expresses as Hladini, that's when, in this pure environment, right, this Guhya Vidya, this knowledge of what brings him pleasure, right, which is actually what relationships are about, when that expresses. So we see that it is actually the most confidential the most secret of all Krishna's abilities. And this is why it's not actually available to just anyone. Only those who are extremely qualified can actually enter into this aspect, Guhya Vidya, and get that knowledge of how to not only become blissful, but also, of course, bring bliss to Krishna, because that's the basis of our relationship with him. We bring him pleasure, and this is how we get pleasure in the process. So this is very, we could say it's a very confidential subject. So many may be able to understand Vishuddha Sattva in terms of knowledge, and may be able to understand in terms of eternality how things come into creation. But actually getting the knowledge of how to develop a relationship with God, how to love him, and how to bring him happiness, right? This is very confidential. And this is why devotional service is often called an open secret. The knowledge of this is actually there in the scriptures, so we could say it's available to everybody, but not everybody will understand it, and not everybody will actually be able to adapt to or take to it. Okay, so there's one more aspect that we will read now. Murti, right? So Murti says, when Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini manifests in equal amounts. So we were saying that when these powers are dominant, right, there's a certain Shakti that occurs. But now when they're in equal amounts, in Vishuddha Sattva, we call it as Murti. So Shri Bhagavan's holy form manifests through this Shakti. So in this pure environment, right, when these three powers are equally present, that's actually when Krishna's form is manifest to us. So we can say, we can take different examples then. Right, so if we've got Krishna's bubble of Vishuddha Sattva, and then we have Adar Shakti, his creative power that's dominant in that bubble, then we could say he's Vrindavan Dham, or any of his dhams manifest, because that's where Krishna's home is, his abode, all things that he needs, right? So this makes sense to us. And that creative power is there, then everything that Krishna needs comes into this bubble. And then when his Goya Shakti is there, then knowledge of Krishna, and that can include him speaking Bhagavad Gita or transcendental books like Srimad Bhagavatam being manifest, those become present. And then when Krishna's pleasure potency, his Hladini Shakti, dominates the environment, then Krishna has confidential pastimes like he has with the gopis. And of course, when all three are present, then Krishna's form will actually manifest in that as well. Okay? This is called Murti. Okay, so like we were saying last week, I know it's a little bit technical, but we need to understand more about the Lord in order to increase our faith in him. And at least we have a theoretical understanding of these terms when they come up. And this will make us a little bit more familiar with the terms as we come across it in scripture. So we will continue reading. The supreme knowledge of Krishna is exhibited in three different energies: internal, marginal, and external. By virtue of his internal energy, he exists in himself with his spiritual paraphernalia, and that is the Chit Shakti. By means of his marginal energies, he exhibits himself as a living entity. Now we may find this interesting because we know that we as souls are different from Krishna. So what are we saying here? He exhibits himself as living entities. So we are also energies of Krishna. Just like we said, Krishna has energies like Srimati Radharani who bring him pleasure. But we are very, 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 very small energies. Srimati Radharani is actually Krishna's pleasure energy, infinitely more superior than we are. But yet still we are from Krishna's energy, which is very small. We can explain it in terms of a fire. Right? A fire is blazing, and a fire can also give rise to another blazing fire, or it can give rise to very tiny sparks from that fire. The properties are all there, right? The property of this blazing fire is the same as the spark, but the spark is very little. So it can express very little power of the fire. So in the same way, we are manifest from Krishna, but we only manifest very little power of his. So we cannot be the same as him. So this is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained, the simultaneous oneness and difference, us being very little, as well as also being an expression of his power at the same time. And we gave another example a lot in the last few weeks, that I have a power to lift something, and you could say that that power is me, right? Because it's coming from me. But at the same time, that power is not me, because I am a lot more than a power to lift, right? I'm a power to speak, I'm a power to see, I'm a power to understand. So it's me and it's not me at the same time. So because we can't express all of God's powers, in the same way, I'm just not a lifting object, right? I'm a full person. But we are not the full person of God. We can't be the full person of Godhead. We don't have all of these abilities, this eternality, knowledge, and bliss. This we have understood or should have understood through these discussions. But we can still express some of it, a little of it. And in that way, we are the same as God, and very different at the same time. And by means of his external energy, he exhibits himself as the material world. So Krishna's internal power to manifest everything in the spiritual world is now expressed here in the material world, but without him, right? So Krishna is described as, the material nature is described as the back of Krishna. The way light exists, darkness exists where light is not there. So when Krishna is not, service to Krishna is not dominant, right? Because the material world can't exist without him. But where the service to him is not dominant, where this material world is being used for us, that's where his external energy exists. Right? Behind each and every exhibition of energy, there is the background of eternity, his pleasure potency, and his cognizance potency. So it's all there, right? Eternality, knowledge, and bliss, right? Krishna's essence, Chit Shakti. It's just in the background. So it's in the background of you and I as the marginal energy, because it is our real existence. We're just covered by the material world. And it's also in the background of the material world, because the material world is simply where the eternality, knowledge, and bliss is not. Right? In the same way, darkness is just where light is not. Darkness is actually not separate from light, because darkness only exists because light is not there. That's a relationship with the material world. Where there is no eternality, knowledge, and bliss, where there is no Chit Shakti, that's the material world. Right? Like two sides of the coin. The conditioned soul is a marginal potency overpowered by the external potency. What does it mean? It means that it's not that our nature ever changes from service to Krishna. Listen, in the same way, a spark of fire is always going to have the same nature as fire. It's always going to be able to burn. It's going to be red hot. It's got the properties of fire. But if you cover it, right? If you cover it physically, you can't see those qualities anymore. So in the same way, when we become covered by this material nature, right, this place which is literally dark as well, compared to the spiritual world, which is self-illuminated. But if we come into this atmosphere that covers our properties, right, our eternality, knowledge, and bliss, then we think that we are of this material nature. Our nature, though, within never changes. Right? The soul actually never changes its properties. It's just covered. So when this same spiritual energy, the soul, becomes uncovered from the material energy and is situated back under the internal power of God, then it becomes eligible for love of Godhead. Okay. So we also gave another example a few weeks ago. We said that we could take the soul to be like sand on the seashore. When the water covers the sand, it seems like the shore is part of the ocean. And when the water uncovers the sand, then we understand that it's actually part of the land. So in the same way, if we are under the experience of being in the material world, then it seems like we're a part of it. But within, our nature never changes. That sand doesn't become water. Right? The sand, even if the water is covering it, sand is always sand. So we souls are always spiritual. We're always of the same nature of Krishna, eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And we just need the opportunity to understand that nature again. So when the water washes away and the sand is there and visible, it's the same way like when the soul becomes free of the material nature, and then it's automatically under the power of the spiritual nature, and then its own qualities of eternality, knowledge, and bliss are uncovered again. This is when we're situated back in the Chit Shakti, where we belong. And especially, like we read in the Hladini division of the Chit Shakti, Srimati Radharani, because then we can get love for Krishna and we can fully develop our relationship with him, right? To bring him pleasure. It's the ultimate service. The Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences, and no one can establish that he is formless or that he is without energy. If someone claims so, his contention is completely opposed to the Vedic instructions. So our conclusion is basically that Krishna has all these different opulences, right? All these different energies, like we described. And the scripture speaks about this. This is where we got all this information from, right? The various scriptures we've been reading from the Upanishads, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Vedanta Sutras, all of this is explaining how Krishna brings things to creation, and giving us knowledge about Krishna. We're reading about his blissful pastimes, right? It actually means that the Vedic teachings are about Krishna's Shaktis, his attributes, his powers. So knowing that he actually has these features, he cannot be formless, because to have a formless divine, supreme divine, means no features, means no attributes, means no powers, means none of this. So it means that to believe that actually means to believe or to be opposed to the Vedic instructions. So if we want to actually get the correct understanding about God, then we have to accept the teachings of the Vedas. And it means anyone who doesn't believe in God's supreme form and all his powers and abilities is actually, well, they're not accepting the Vedic teaching. That's actually what we need to accept. That this is the unfortunate conclusion. We don't. It's almost you could say that we don't have a choice but to believe that God has the supreme form. This is just what the Vedas say, and if we reject it, then we actually reject the Vedas outright. This is the bottom line. The Vedas are teaching us about the Lord's different energies. Actually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of all energies. The living entity, however, being his infinitesimal part and parcel, can be overpowered by the material energy. So as much as we are overpowered by the material energy, it doesn't mean that we actually become the material energy, that we ever lose our property of being Krishna's servants. He's always the master of us. We just temporarily come under the power of the material energy, and we can also be freed from that as well. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is stated that 2 birds are sitting on the same tree. One of them is eating the fruit of the tree, while the other is not eating but simply witnessing the activities of the first bird. Only when the bird eating the fruit looks towards the other bird does he become free from all anxieties. This is the position of the infinitesimal living entity. As soon as he is forgetful of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is subjected to the threefold miseries. And when he looks towards the Supreme Lord and becomes the Lord's devotee, he becomes free from all anxieties and miseries of material existence. So the consequence of us coming into this world and becoming situated under the shelter of the material nature, under that covering, is when we believe ourselves to be ignorant and miserable and temporary like this world, then miseries set in. we get affected by all of the conditions of this world. And there's threefold miseries that are described in particular. The threefold miseries are miseries that are brought on by our own body, mind, and soul, adi atmi. Miseries caused by other living entities, right? Adi bautik, right? And those entities can be simple things like bugs, it can be germs, it can be other people, right? Animals. And then there's miseries caused by natural disasters, and that's called adidaivik. Those natural disasters, of course, include droughts and famine and so on. So as soon as we come into this material world, those three miseries are there with us everywhere. And when we become uncovered from the material influence, then we're not subject to those miseries anymore. So it could be that the Lord actually chooses to remove them by his power. It means that we become completely unaffected, being so spiritual that none of these miseries trouble us anymore. And then the ultimate solution is that we go back to Krishna at the end of these lives, and then we don't experience those miseries anymore, because in the spiritual world there's no influence of any of these threefold types of suffering. So this is what happens when one takes to devotional service to the Lord, and that's the ultimate instruction of Lord Chaitanya. So we'll continue with, I think it'll be our last part of this discussion, the discussions on this chapter next week. So please join us for that, and thank you all for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Are there any comments or questions? Anything that can clarify? I must apologize again that there was so much, we could say, philosophy in our discussions, but we're trying to um, develop our knowledge of Krishna so we can develop our relationship with Krishna. So it means that sometimes there's a lot of theory to what we're doing, and helps us to get our faith in Krishna as well, strengthen. So if there are no questions, then we'll just we'll conclude with some kirtan. I'm back to using Karuna's phone. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to share my screen. I'll just post the words for the bhajan quickly. Just put it in the chat quickly. This works this time. Krishna Jinka Naam Hai, Gokula Jinka Naam Hai, Aise Shri Bhagavan ko mere बारंबार नाम है, कृष्णा जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका धाम है। इस श्री भगवान को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। यशोदा जिनकी मैया है, नंद जी बापैया है। इस श्री गोपाल को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। राधा जिनकी जाया है, अद्भुत जिनकी माया है। इस श्री घनश्याम को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। लूट लूट बद्धि माखन खायो, ग्वाल बाल संग धेनु चरायो। इस लीला धाम को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। द्रुपद सुत को लाज बचायो, रहस्य गज को खंड छुड़ायो। इस कृपा धाम को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। गुरु पांडव को युद्ध मचायो, अर्जुन को उपदेश सुनायो। इस दीननाथ को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। ना जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका धाम है। इस श्री भगवान को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। कृष्णा जिनका नाम है, गोकुल जिनका धाम है। इस श्री भगवान को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। इस श्री भगवान को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। श्री भगवान को मेरे बारंबार प्रणाम है। It's a nice bhajan that is full of pastimes and activities of Krishna to increase our knowledge of him. So I'll read the translation. He whose name is Krishna and whose abode is Gokul, unto such a supreme personality of Godhead I offer my humble obeisances again and again. He whose mother is Yashoda and whose father is Nandaji, unto such a cowherd boy named Gopal I offer my humble obeisances again and again. He whose beloved is Radha and whose illusory energy is very amazing, unto he whose splendorous complexion is the color of the fresh rain cloud, I offer my humble obeisances again and again. He who sneaks around to steal yogurt and butter, then hides to eat it, and who tends the cows in the company of his cowherd boyfriends, unto he who is the reservoir of playful pastimes, I offer my humble obeisances again and again. He who prevented the dishonoring of the daughter of Drupad, and who delivered the elephant Gajendra from the grasp of the alligator, unto he who is the abode of all compassion, I offer my humble obeisances again and again. He who caused the great war between the Kurus and the Pandavas, and who spoke divine instructions to Arjuna on the battlefield, unto he who is the Lord of all helpless, fallen souls, I offer my humble obeisances again and again. So there's a variation below of verse C. Radha jini ki chaya hai, Krishna ji kanaya hai. Esi Shri Ghanshyam ko mere bharam bharam pranam hai. And that translation is, Krishna's shadow is Srimati Radharani. Krishna is Kanaya. Unto the Lord, whose splendorous complexion is the color of a rain cloud, I offer my humble obeisances again and again. So again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please join us next week when we continue and conclude our discussions on this chapter. Hare Krishna.